who's actually going to get the most out of the Fujifilm X Pro 2, who can safely walk away, and does the price make sense for the average photographer who just wants solid results without chasing every new feature? Those are the three questions that keep most shoppers up at night, especially when the market is flooded with mirrorless bodies promising the next level. I've spent the last few weeks digging into how the X Pro 2 feels in real-world shoots, reading forums where street shooters argue about viewfinders, and watching a handful of YouTubers compare its autofocus to other APS-C options. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest hesitation I saw from potential buyers is the learning curve. Fujifilm's hybrid viewfinder is a love-or-hate feature. You can flip between an optical view that shows you a real-time scene and an electronic one that displays exposure data and face-detect AF points. That sounds great until you realize you have to get comfortable with two different ways of composing, and the menu that lets you switch isn't exactly a single-press toggle. If you're used to a pure electronic viewfinder or a DSLR's optical window, there's a short adjustment period. For someone who's already comfortable with Fujifilm's film simulations and enjoys tweaking settings on the fly, the extra step feels like a bonus. For a beginner who just wants point-and-shoot reliability, it can feel like an unnecessary hurdle. The autofocus system is where the X Pro 2 really tries to prove itself. With 273 selectable hybrid phase detect points, it gives you a lot of flexibility in where you place focus, especially useful when shooting street scenes or candid portraits where the subject might not be in the center. In practice, the AF tracks decently, but it's not as aggressive as some competitors that use on-sensor phase detection across the entire frame. In a low-light bar crawl I did last weekend, the camera managed to lock onto a moving subject at f2.0 and ISO 3200 without hunting. But it did take a second or two to settle when the subject changed direction sharply. If you need rock-solid tracking for fast action, think sports or wildlife, you'll notice that the X Pro 2 lags behind the newest Sony or Canon mirrorless models. For a hobbyist who mostly shoots in ambient light or does occasional night street, the AF is more than adequate. Low-light performance ties directly into the sensor and the lack of built-in image stabilization. The 24.3 MP X-Trans 3 sensor is known for handling high ISO with relatively clean grain, and the new Acros monochrome simulation brings out detail in black and white scenes without a lot of post-processing. In a real test at a dimly lit jazz club, the camera delivered usable JPEGs up to ISO 6400 with the shadows still retaining texture. However, because the body itself doesn't have sensor shift stabilization, you'll rely on lenses with optical IS or steady hands. If you're planning to shoot handheld video or low-light handheld stills for extended periods, you'll either need a fast, stabilized lens or a tripod. That's a trade-off many buyers overlook when they focus on sensor size alone. Speaking of lenses, the Fujifilm X-mount ecosystem is a strong point. There's a solid selection of prime lenses in the 23mm to 56mm range that are perfect for street and documentary work, and the newer 23mm, f1.4 and 56mm, f1.2 are both sharp and fast, giving you the ability to keep the ISO down in dim environments. The downside is that the high-end zooms tend to be pricey, and if you're already invested in a different mount, you'll have to factor in an adapter, which can introduce a slight lag in AF response. For creators who already own a few Fujifilm lenses, the X Pro 2 feels like a natural extension. For newcomers who have to buy lenses from scratch, the total cost of ownership climbs quickly. Menu navigation on Fujifilm bodies is famously deep, with multiple layers for things like film simulation, dynamic range, and focus settings. The X Pro 2 adds a few more options for the hybrid viewfinder, which means you'll spend some time memorizing where the multi-magnification function lives. In everyday shooting, this isn't a deal-breaker, but it does add friction when you need to change a setting mid-shoot. If you love customizing every parameter and enjoy the tactile dials on the top plate, you'll appreciate the level of control. If you prefer a more streamlined interface like the Sony 6000 series, the menu depth can feel like a nuisance. Battery life on the X Pro 2 is decent, but not spectacular. In my tests, a fully charged NPW 126 gave me around 380 shots, which aligns with Fujifilm's own numbers. That's fine for a day of street shooting, especially if you carry a spare. The camera's power draw spikes when you're constantly switching between the optical and electronic viewfinders. So if you're doing a marathon shoot with a lot of viewfinder changes, you might need an extra battery or a portable charger. For a casual user who shoots a few hours a day, the battery confidence is acceptable. For a professional who needs to shoot all day without a recharge, it's